In June 1627, a quiet dawn on the Westman Islands turned to horror as an Ottoman fleet appeared on the horizon. Known as the Barbary pirates, these raiders came from Algiers, part of a network infamous for capturing slaves from Europe's northern coasts. Iceland, remote and unsuspecting, was unprepared for such an attack. Ólafur Egilsson, a Lutheran minister from Vestmannaeyjar, bore witness to this tragic day, a day that would change his life forever. In his memoir, he recalls the chilling clarity of that morning.
The sea was calm, a mirror reflecting the sky, and I rose from my bed as any other morning, my heart light. Little did I know that shadows lay upon the waves, bearing a terror we could never have foreseen.
The pirates, led by Murat Reis, struck swiftly and mercilessly, descending upon the island with practiced precision. Shouts filled the air as the raiders moved through the village, ransacking homes, killing those who resisted, and binding those they captured. Families were torn from one another as children screamed for their parents, and parents tried in vain to shield their little ones. Ólafur and his family had only moments to react as the invaders advanced upon them. He recalls the terror of that moment.
The cries of our neighbors reached us first, terrible, unearthly. I looked into the eyes of my wife, and in that instant, we knew that there would be no escape.
Ólafur, his wife Asta, and their children were among the captives. The pirates bound them in chains, pushing them onto the ships that would take them far from home. In the confusion and fear, Ólafur clung to his children, trying to comfort them even as he fought to steady his own heart. The pirates showed no mercy, treating the captives like mere commodities, shoving them roughly into the crowded hold of the ship.
They forced us down into darkness,
he wrote,
a place where light could not reach, where the cries of the frightened filled every corner. My children clung to me, their small hands gripping my arms, their voices trembling as they asked,
"Father, will we see our home again?"
I could not answer, for my heart held only fear.
As the ship pulled away from the shore, Ólafur took one last look at the cliffs of Vestmannaeyjar, the familiar shapes he had known all his life fading into the distance. He wrote of the despair that settled over him.
Our island disappeared into the mist, as if swallowed by the very sea that had been our life. I could no longer see the land of my birth, and in that moment, it felt as though my soul was leaving with it.
In the darkness of the hold, surrounded by the terrified whispers of his fellow captives, Ólafur prayed as he had never prayed before.
I lifted my voice to the heavens, pleading for strength, for deliverance. I prayed not only for myself, but for my wife, for my children, for all those who now shared this prison with us. I called upon the Lord, asking that he might carry us through this trial, though I feared that even he could not reach us in the darkness we now faced.
The journey from Iceland to Algiers was a brutal ordeal, testing every ounce of endurance Ólafur and his fellow captives possessed. Packed into the dark, cramped hold of the pirate ship, the Icelanders were treated as mere cargo, their lives stripped down to the most basic struggle for survival. The conditions were harrowing. The captives were forced to sit or crouch in the sweltering, airless space, with barely room to move. The ship creaked and groaned as it sailed southward, each wave carrying them further from their homeland. Ólafur describes the suffocating misery of the hold, where despair weighed as heavily as the fetid air.
The darkness was as thick as the iron around our wrists. Each breath was a struggle, each hour a lifetime of pain.
As the days turned into weeks, hunger and illness began to spread through the crowded space. The pirates offered little food and water, barely enough to sustain life, keeping the captives weak and subdued. The relentless heat during the day, followed by freezing temperatures at night, left many weakened and vulnerable to sickness. Ólafur watched in helpless sorrow as friends and neighbors grew ill, the strength slowly draining from their bodies.
Death moved silently among us,
he wrote,
its shadow passing over faces I had known all my life. I prayed each night that my children and Asta might survive, that the Lord would grant them strength to see another dawn.
Despite the exhaustion and fear that plagued him, Ólafur tried to be a source of comfort for his family, especially his young children. In the darkness, he held them close, whispering stories and familiar prayers to keep their spirits alive.
I told them of our home, of the cliffs and the sea, of the warmth of our hearth, as if these words could shield them from the terror that surrounded us.
Throughout the voyage, Ólafur clung to his faith as his last source of strength. In stolen moments of solitude, he prayed with a desperation he had never felt before, calling upon God to guide them through the darkness. His prayers, he later admitted, were often filled with doubt as he struggled to believe that God could hear him from such a distant and despairing place.
I lifted my voice in prayer.
He wrote,
though my words felt small and hollow, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the sea. Yet I prayed still, for it was all I had left.
Finally, after weeks of suffering in the dark, cramped hold, the ship neared the coast of Algiers. As the captives were led out into the blinding sunlight, Ólafur felt the contrasting emotions of relief and apprehension. Though the ordeal of the sea voyage had ended, he knew that their trials were far from over. Algiers loomed before them, a city unlike any he had imagined, foreign and daunting. With his family by his side, Ólafur struggled to mask his fear, unsure of the fate awaiting them in this distant, unfamiliar place.
We stepped onto foreign soil, our eyes struggling to adjust, our hearts heavy with dread. I clutched my children's hands, knowing I could not protect them from whatever lay ahead.
When Ólafur and his fellow captives arrived in Algiers, the stark reality of their plight became undeniable. The blinding sun and heavy heat of the port city were almost suffocating as they stumbled off the ship, weakened from the arduous journey. Around them, the unfamiliar sights and sounds of Algiers created a disorienting haze. The streets were alive with bustling markets, unfamiliar languages, and the sharp scent of spices and sea air. To the Icelanders, accustomed to their isolated homeland, this city was a bewildering world of color and chaos. For Ólafur, it was not a place of wonder, but a harbinger of suffering.
This was not a land of marvels,
he wrote later,
but a prison cloaked in noise and shadow, where we were unseen except as objects of profit.
The captives were marched through the city in chains, their movements watched by curious onlookers who regarded them as commodities rather than people. As they reached the slave market, the captives were forced to stand in lines, their fates to be decided by those who would purchase them.
We were herded like sheep,
Ólafur recalled,
stripped not only of our freedom but of our dignity.
Ólafur clung tightly to his wife Asta and their children, holding their hands as though his grip alone might shield them from what was to come. He whispered words of reassurance to his children, though he feared they would be among his last.
I tried to be strong for them,
he wrote,
but in my heart, I knew that this place would tear us apart.
One by one, families were separated as buyers selected captives with no regard for their bonds. When Ólafur's turn came, the moment he had dreaded arrived with devastating swiftness. His wife and children were pulled from his grasp, their cries mingling with the noise of the market. He reached for them, calling their names, but his voice was drowned in the chaos.
They were torn from me as though by the wind,
he recalled,
their faces disappearing into the crowd, leaving me hollow.
In the midst of this anguish, a remarkable moment of courage emerged. Ólafur's young son Egil, sensing his father's despair, looked up at him with unwavering determination and said,
I will not forsake my faith, father. No matter what they do, I will remain steadfast.
Egil's words struck Ólafur deeply, a glimmer of light in an otherwise unbearable moment.
His strength became mine.
Ólafur later wrote,
a reminder that even in the darkest hour, faith could endure.
Alone now with his family gone, Ólafur stood in the market as a man stripped of everything but his memories and his hope. He would carry the memory of that moment, his son's resilience and his family's final embrace, with him through the trials that lay ahead. Stripped of freedom and separated from his family, Ólafur faced the harsh reality of life as a slave in Algiers. Assigned to a household, he was forced into daily labor, his autonomy gone. Each day began at dawn and ended only when his captors allowed, with menial tasks that took a toll on his body and spirit. He described his new reality as an endless cycle where time blurred and each hour stretched painfully.
My days were no longer mine, he wrote. The work was unyielding, each task a reminder of all I had lost and could no longer claim.
The environment itself was foreign and unforgiving. Ólafur, accustomed to Iceland's cold air and rocky landscape, struggled in Algiers' relentless heat. The sun bore down on him, sapping his strength, while the labor drained his body. Physically weakened and mentally exhausted, he found himself tested in ways he had never known.
The sun beat upon me like a hammer,
he recalled,
harsh and indifferent, leaving me as hollow as the land that now bound me.
Amid these hardships, Ólafur held on to his faith, praying in stolen moments of solitude. His faith became his lifeline, the one connection he retained to his family, his homeland, and the hope of eventual freedom. Yet even this faith was often clouded by doubt, his prayers sometimes feeling as if they drifted unheard into a distant sky.
I lifted my voice in prayer,
he confessed,
though often it felt as if my words vanished into a void. I feared that even God had turned away.
At night, when the house was silent, Ólafur allowed himself to remember his wife and children. He relived the moments they had shared, imagining their voices and laughter, which became both a source of comfort and pain.
Their faces came to me in the stillness,
he wrote,
like a distant light I could no longer reach. Each memory was a balm, yet a wound, reminding me of what I could never regain.
His status as a minister offered small mercies. He was spared the most brutal labor that others endured. However, his days remained bound by the will of his captors. In these moments of despair, he found strength in a single thought, that one day somehow he might be free again and reunited with his family.
I told myself that I must endure, not only for myself but for them,
he reflected.
Though hope was as faint as a distant star, it was all I had, and I clung to it with every breath.
Life in Algiers was filled with contrasts, vibrant and strange to the outsider, yet cold and oppressive to Ólafur. Though hardship threatened to break him, his faith and memories sustained him, offering him a fragile thread of hope that he would one day find freedom and perhaps the family he had lost. Months into his captivity, Ólafur was unexpectedly summoned by the Dey of Algiers, who saw potential in Ólafur's status as a Lutheran minister. The Dey offered him a rare chance to seek ransom in Europe, not only for himself but potentially for other Icelandic captives. The offer filled Ólafur with both hope and dread. He knew the path would be fraught with hardship, and that failure might mean he would never see his family again. Ólafur's conflicting emotions about the mission are evident in his writing.
Freedom lay within reach, yet it was a journey bound to trials beyond my strength. The vision of my children's faces, of my wife's embrace, drove me to accept. I set forth with only my faith to guide me.
The Dey granted him modest provisions, and with this, he began his journey across Europe. Ólafur traveled from city to city, his route stretching through Italy, the Netherlands, and ultimately Denmark. He approached nobles, church leaders, and men of influence, recounting his story and pleading for their help. Many listened with distant sympathy, some gave small donations, but most turned him away, their generosity as elusive as the promise of freedom. He recorded his disappointment and resilience in these moments.
I stood before men of wealth, my heart open, yet was often met with silence. Yet I carried on, for the thought of my family left me no choice.
In Denmark, Ólafur reached the court of King Christian IV, Iceland's ruler, and finally found some comfort in the king's compassion. Christian provided what funds he could spare, yet the amount fell heartbreakingly short of what was needed to free all the captives, including Ólafur's family. Though he was deeply grateful for the king's kindness, this partial success left a hollow ache.
The king's mercy lifted a part of my burden, yet it could not mend the wound within me.
Ólafur wrote, knowing he would return to Iceland without his family. With limited funds raised and his appeals exhausted, Ólafur accepted that he would have to return home alone. The weight of leaving Algiers without his loved ones was nearly unbearable, and each step on the journey back felt heavier with the knowledge of his incomplete mission. Yet he held on to a fragile hope, praying that someday he might still find a way to secure their freedom. Reflecting on his journey, Ólafur wrote of the strength he drew from his faith, even as his spirit grew weary.
My hope had dimmed like a candle in the wind, yet I carried it still, for it was the only light left in the darkness.
His journey across Europe had tested him beyond measure, yet he returned to Iceland determined to keep fighting for his family's release, however distant that hope might be. Ólafur returned to Iceland in 1628, a free man in body but bound by the grief of leaving his family behind. The familiar shores of Vestmannaeyjar, once a place of comfort, now seemed haunted by their absence.
The cliffs rose as they always had.
He wrote,
the sea unchanged, yet in my heart all was different. I felt like a stranger returning to a life that no longer fit.
His community welcomed him back with sympathy and respect, knowing he had endured unimaginable trials. Yet, the emptiness of his home and the memories of his wife and children left him hollow. Resuming his role as a minister, Ólafur found solace in serving his congregation, though each sermon echoed his own sorrow. He spoke of faith, endurance, and a hope, themes that resonated deeply with a community still mourning the loss of their loved ones to the Barbary pirates. Privately, however, Ólafur wrestled with his faith, struggling to reconcile his belief in a just God with the suffering he and his family had endured.
I preached of hope, he wrote, yet my own heart was hollow. My words felt as fragile as glass, cracked by the weight of my despair.
In his quiet moments, Ólafur clung to the memory of his family. He pictured the faces of his children, their laughter, and the touch of Asta's hand, fearing that time might one day steal these precious images.
Their absence was a shadow that followed me,
he reflected,
an ache that lingered in every corner of my heart. Yet I prayed that their memory would remain, unblemished by the passing years.
Ólafur poured his grief, questions, and faith into his memoir, which became more than just a personal account. It was a message to his people and future generations, a testament to resilience, love, and the strength found in enduring even the darkest trials.
I write not only for myself,
he explained,
but for those who come after me. If my story can bring strength to even one soul, then my suffering will not have been in vain.
Despite his doubts, Ólafur's faith remained an anchor, offering him a sense of purpose. He held fast to the belief that love transcended even the greatest separations. In his memoir's final pages, he expressed his enduring hope, the vision of being reunited with his family in the life to come.
Though my eyes may never see them again in this life,
he wrote,
I trust that love endures beyond all things. I pray that when my days are done, I shall see them again in a place where there is no suffering, no separation.
Ólafur Egilsson's life, though marked by loss, became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Through his faith, his service, and his writing, he created a legacy of hope and endurance. His story endures as a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable sorrow, love and faith can offer strength, purpose, and peace.